we're going to talk about is continue on maneuver warfare. I'm going to introduce this idea of defeat mechanisms. Hey, this is in our doctrine. So in ADP 3-0, you're going to see defeat mechanisms. Nobody really knows what they are, how to use them. So what I find interesting is they're steeped. I mean, it's super influenced by maneuver warfare. Nobody knows what it is, how to use them. So that's the purpose of this video. Hey, I want to make sure I give a shout out to Robert Leonard, Art of Maneuver. I pulled a lot of my material from him. So Robert Leonard, Art of Maneuver, game-changing book. All right, so first understand defeat mechanisms. You have to understand the difference between defeat and destroy. Almost always we are fascinated and we are drawn to destroy rather than defeat. And understanding the difference is really key for us to continue on. So destroy means killing something, destroying a tank and so on. It is, it's very easy to wrap your mind around. You see, the destruction. You watch the YouTube videos, Kill Cam, and you watch it, and it's, you count bodies and all that, and it seems like you're winning. It seems like you're gaining somewhere. However, that we've learned, if you any student of history through Vietnam War and through on and on and on, killing folks does not equal victory. I mean, you think of the Civil War. When was the Civil War really won? It wasn't, when Lee had lost so many people. It's when Robert E. Lee signed a piece of paper and said he'd had enough. If the Vietnam War teaches us anything, body counts does not equal victory. And so we have to get away from the false god that destruction equals winning. It's just a component of it. But what you're leading to is to defeat. The reason is defeat is psychological. It's the person who taps out. It's when they've had enough. When they, again, they've gotten confused, and it creates hopelessness. Once they lose hope, that's when they sign the piece of paper and they said, I'm defeated. It's acknowledging they've lost the will to fight. And interesting, you can count it just like you count, tanks destroyed or casualties inflicted on the enemy. It's how you count prisoners of war. Because when someone gives up and they've had enough, and then they're really they've lost their will to fight and they're becoming more defeated. So that's why a lot of times it's more important to capture folks than to destroy them, because once you're capturing them, prisoners of war, you're gaining toward defeat. So it's important to understand destruction is all based on physically destroying, and you can see it and you can really count it. Where defeat is psychological. It's harder to quantify. It's harder to see what people are thinking. But that defeat is where victory resides, in the minds of the opponent. So how do you get there? How do you defeat your opponent? Well, in our doctrine, we have mechanisms to achieve it. All right. So the first mechanism is, interesting enough, is destroy. But notice, destroy in and of itself, as we talked to, doesn't lead to victory. It's a component of it. But if you destroy a certain amount of things, then you add something else. You add dislocation. And we'll go in just a minute what that is. Dislocation. Then you add disintegration. You add isolation. That will lead to defeat. So how do you defeat your opponent? It is through defeat mechanisms, through destruction, dislocation, disintegration, and isolation. Now, these terms need probably further definition. So destroy, I think you know what that means. So dislocate, what that really means is you dislocate somebody is you render their strengths or their position irrelevant. Okay, what does that mean? What that means is a lot of times a person will be on a really good fighting position. Maybe consider yourself on a hilltop and you're overlooking a choke point. You can see a bridge. If the enemy comes through that bridge, you can rain down fire upon them and you'll win. Okay, so the enemy's in this great position. Well, what if you just didn't go that way? What if you found a bypass route and you were able to continue on their way? In that one moment, that enemy was in this really great fighting position. Now he's just a jerk on a hill, and he has no bearing on the fight whatsoever. And now that great position is just a hole he's sitting in because the fight just moved on without him. So now in that moment he's going to get up and he's got to leave and move off. That would be dislocating. You rendered his good fighting position irrelevant. It's meaningless because the fight isn't there. A good example is if you've seen the battle of, you've studied the Battle of Gettysburg, where the enemy, where the Union is arrayed on their, on the Elementary Ridge, and Lee wants to attack them frontally, and Longstreet keeps trying to persuade Lee to not just to leave, to head toward Baltimore. And he said by then they can't stay there anymore. They have to follow him and pull them out, dislocate them out of that good position. So that's an example of rendering their strength, their position, irrelevant. There's also, you can render someone functionally irrelevant, meaning that they have a strength. Maybe they have tanks. A lot of tanks, their strength is long-range precision fires, armor fires. That's their strength. How do you render that irrelevant? If we were able to then make the fight into a big city, where the fight's going to be really close, or into a long column, heavily forested along bridges, again, an infantry country. You're functionally dislocating the enemy because they can't you're making their strengths irrelevant. So geographically and functionally is how you dislocate the enemy. So notice you destroy plus dislocate, render their strengths irrelevant. Now you get into disintegrate. So disintegrate's kind of a, difficult word. Every time I hear it, I think of the Green Martian on the Bugs Bunny cartoon. He's going to hit him with a disintegration ray. A better way to think about it, and something you're probably all very well aware of, is disruption. Disruption is best understood as you are attacking a critical vulnerability. I can't spell. You know what it is? A critical vulnerability. What that usually is going to be is the enemy's command post. You destroy the enemy commander, capture the enemy commander, that whole organization will come undone. You destroy the enemy's logistics, i.e. their fueler. You hit their fuelers, you hit their ammo dumps, you attack something in their rear area, it disrupts them. It creates, think of you throw a big rock into a pond and just splashes and just creates all these ripples. You cut their you cut their ability to communicate. That will send out shock, and that shock then gets into the mind and creates defeat. So disruption is attacking a critical vulnerability, or in this one is disintegrate. So if you want to use your disintegration ray, shoot the enemy commander. All right, lastly is isolate, pretty self-explanatory, but what you're really aiming at is cutting their line of communication. You're isolating them from all support. You can use that, this is where cyber can be effective. You're cutting off any kind of internet or any kind of communications. This is where you cut their roads, you cut the railroads, you cut their ability to get any kind of aircraft support. I mean, think of Dien Bien Phu when they were in that valley and it kept no more planes were coming, right? The Viet Minh were able to raise their artillery up on the high ground and rain so much fires on the airfield that no more planes were coming. At that moment, they were isolated, and then hopelessness started seeping in. So what you're talking about here is how you use the defeat mechanisms in U.S. Army doctrine to get a maneuver warfare is you destroy something. You destroy certain capabilities they need. You dislocate. You render their strengths irrelevant. You disintegrate them, shoot them with a disintegration ray, and destroy basically their enemy commander, to be clear, or their refuelers or logistics. Then you isolate them from all support. So this plus destroy, plus dislocate, plus disintegrate, plus isolate, that equals defeat. And that's how you use the defeat mechanism. Now there's one last portion that maneuver warfare ascribes, that is the Pinnacle, or if you say the platinum version, if we set up maneuver warfare, your methods is in platinum, gold, silver, bronze, the platinum, that isn't really described very well at all in our doctrine, but is in Bob Leonard's Art of Maneuver, is this idea of preemption. This is the purest form of maneuver warfare. It's hitting the other person when they're not even ready. It's stealing the victory. It's snatching victory before the fight is. Americans typically find this culturally, abhorrent, distasteful, because it's not fair. That wasn't fair. But again, maneuver warfare is this idea of the kick in the groin, the poke of the eye. it is winning, outthinking someone rather than just bare brawling them. So, I'll give you an example. Preemption would be, if you've all seen the movie Rocky IV, that's going to be the ultimate attrition fight. Rocky Balboa against Ivan Drago in the ring, and they're just going to pound each other until sheer exhaustion and toughness overwhelms. Imagine Ivan Drago's walking out, and Rocky Balboa grabs a big chair, runs to the crowd, and smacks him on the head, knocking him unconscious before the fight ever started. That would be preemption. That is snatching the victory before it even started. That is the platinum version of using maneuver warfare, and you're basically winning before the fight even starts. And so I would consider preemption as the ultimate and the defeat mechanisms to snatch the victory before it even started. Remember, Sun Tzu says the ultimate in warfighting is to win before the battle even starts. So consider preemption and as adding that to our defeat mechanisms. Again, it's not really described in our doctrine because typically we find that Americans distasteful. But again, if you are fighting fair, then your tactics suck. All right, thanks for watching Hunt, Race, Kill.